Let's talk some more about Stoicism. We were going through the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and we have landed in book 6. And here is section 26. If someone puts to you the question, how is the name Antoninus spelt? Will you shout your way through each of the syllables? What then if they get angry? Will you lose your temper too? Will you not rather calmly go through the sequence of letters, telling them each one in turn? So also in your life here, remember that every duty is the completed sum of certain actions. You must observe these without being disconcerted or answering others' resentment with your own, but following each purpose methodically to its end. That's an interesting one. Step by step. And then you see what happens. And you see where you end up, right? But when you think about it, pretty much everything we do is kind of a sequence of steps, right? A set of steps that you go through bit by bit. And when I was reading this, I was reminded of a novel I once read about the failed Bravo to Zero mission from the Special Air Service in Iraq. Now, to cut a long story short, this is based in truth. All kinds of things went wrong. A set of commandos basically dropped behind enemy lines, and everything that can go wrong goes wrong. So they're given by accident the wrong radio frequency, so they cannot call their base or radio their base. They make contact with enemy troops, and in a nutshell, all the members of that platoon squad I should say, I think, get killed or captured, except for one of the soldiers. He manages to get away, so the novel is called The One That Got Away. And he describes how it becomes an escape and evasion situation. He has to try to stay out of the hands of the enemy soldiers, right? They will capture him or kill him. And he has to make it to the border so that he can be safe, right? And he describes how he tries to hide during the day and sleep, and then march at night. Now here's the point I'm getting to. Of course, he's exhausted. He's carrying all kinds of gear, and he is just marching a lot. It's scary, etc. All these things, right? So he's exhausted, and he describes how through the night he is marching through a desert. It's very cold at night, and he tries to focus on the next thing that he has to do. So he tells himself, well, I'm going to climb that dune, and then over that dune, and there will be a city, right? So that he kind of gives himself hope that there will be something. And then he goes on further, and he says to himself as he gets more tired, like, it's just a matter of 20 meters, and I can take a break. Walk another 20 meters, I can take a break. Until it's to 10 meters, 5 meters, etc. Until at some point he has to tell himself, take one step, and take another step, and take another step. And the difficulty in that is that he has to do that to keep going. But you notice how small his world has become. It's not about the next dune, it's not about this distance, it's just about step by step. And very often I think when we try to do things in life, then we can get overwhelmed and we lose track of the simple observation that everything we do is just a collection of steps, right? Whether it's something simple or whether it's something more complicated. And even in complicated things, interpersonal relationships, for example, you still deal with a process that very much is a collection of steps, right? Little steps at a time that will, in time, add up to something big. But they can be hard to see, especially when we get distracted by things, and especially when things don't go so well with us, right? Then you can really start to notice that it's very hard to stay focused on the next step and the next step. But then what do you do, right? I liked what Marcus Aurelius wrote here. So also in your life here, remember that every duty is the completed sum of certain actions. So every duty, everything you can do, right? Things that you may have to do, at the end of the day are steps. And I have found many times in the past that it was easy for me to get overwhelmed. If I would have to do certain things, I would feel overwhelmed. And I would kind of panic. And I would almost say I would lose hope. I would think, well, this is not doable, this can't be done, I may as well give up. But I think especially at those moments, this strategy, this basic idea of, well, what are the steps involved? What step do I take first? What step after that? And after that, so that every time I get a little closer to where I need to be. Now, as a psychologist, sort of from a cognitive perspective, we would say you set sub-goals, right? You break down the different things you have to do to get to where you need to be. And every time you finish or meet or hit a sub-goal, you get a little closer to where it is you need or want to be. And I think that's a good way to look at things, and that can be very difficult, especially when you deal with very complicated scenarios. It can be very difficult to see the different steps, but very often you can see at least one or two steps ahead of yourself, right? You can see kind of what the next thing is that you would likely have to do. And if you can figure out what the next thing is you have to do, then once you get there, you can figure out the next thing and the next thing. And if you approach things that way, then I think a lot of problems and a lot of issues get a little less overwhelming. But this is hard to do. But the good news is that this is one of those things that the more you do it, the easier it gets. And as a result, the less overwhelmed you tend to get, which is a good thing. So that, I think, is an interesting, well, to be honest, association I had with Marcus Aurelius here. And of course I think he's talking about other things, also about the education of others. Something that figured largely in Marcus Aurelius's writings is that as an emperor he had an exemplary function, right? He had to be an example to other people, and I think it can actually be said that Marcus Aurelius was one of the few leaders who actually led by example, who was a virtuous person, who had the best intentions with his people. So he's also talking about duties that he struggled with, that we know he struggled with, and he's talking about those things that he has to do and how you can try to teach others, right? That's one of his big things. If you don't like how other people treat you, then you can try to teach them how to treat you. It doesn't always work, unfortunately. But that's a different one that we should cover another time, I think. So step by step, and then see where that gets you, and then where the next step gets you, and where the next step gets you. And if you break things down like that, then even complicated issues can get clearer, I think. Not necessarily easier to solve, but can get clearer, and at the very least less overwhelming, because you know you're not trying to solve the entire problem in one go. You're trying to solve a little facet of it, and a little facet of it, and a little facet, until you get to, hopefully, where you want to be. And that's pretty much it. I hope this was useful, and I shall see you again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Thanks for watching.